picture this. You've just had like one of those truly exhausting, soul-crushing days.
Oh yeah, we all know the kind.
Right, where absolutely everything goes wrong. Your energy is just completely depleted and you really just want to collapse. So you're sitting there on your couch, staring down at your phone. You have hundreds of contacts saved in your directory.
There'll be even thousands of followers online, right?
Exactly. But in that exact moment, when you just need someone to come over, sit on that couch with you, and do absolutely nothing, your mind just goes blank.
Yeah, it's a terrible feeling.
It is. You scroll and scroll, and you realize you feel completely, utterly isolated in this massive sea of digital connection. And, you think to yourself, is there something wrong with me?
Oh, yeah, am I just bad at making friends?
Right. But I want to tell you right now, that sinking feeling is not a personal failure. What you are experiencing is a very real symptom of a massive, invisible societal shift. Welcome, listeners, to another My Mind MashUps deep dive where we unravel mysteries, spark curiosity, and make sense of complex ideas together.
It really is a profound shift. I mean, it goes far beyond just feeling a little down on a Friday night,
Yeah.
We're actually looking at a fundamental rewiring of the human experience.
And we are going to get into the mechanics of that rewiring today. But first, keeping with our core values, every deep dive we do here is about three things: sparking curiosity, challenging assumptions, and expanding understanding.
Always.
And taking a quick moment, we sincerely want to thank all the listeners who showed their appreciation by buying us a coffee recently.
Yes, thank you so much.
Your support is what keeps the research flowing and these microphones on. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy content that makes you think.
That support truly allows us to take the time to, synthesize the massive amount of data surrounding issues like the one on the table today.
And today's stack of sources is incredibly robust. We are pulling together findings from the American Perspective Survey, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Gallup polls.
Some really heavy data in there.
Very heavy. Including some rather stark public health warnings from the U.S. Surgeon General and the World Health Organization. We are exploring a phenomenon that researchers are now officially calling the friendship recession. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so the phrasing of a recession is deeply intentional by sociologists.
How so?
Well, when economists talk about a financial recession, they aren't just talking about, like, a bad week on the stock market.
Right, it's a bigger trend.
Exactly. They're describing a measurable, sustained systemic decline in wealth and resources over time.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the sources we are looking at today point to a measurable, sustained decline in the number of close friends people have, like the actual hours they spend with them and their overall satisfaction with their social support networks.
Wow, so thinking about it in economic terms, it kind of feels like our social lives are a bank account.
That's a great way to put it.
Like for decades, we were steadily building up a healthy balance of community interaction. But right now, as a society, we are severely overdrawn on our social capital.
Yeah, we've been spending down the principal without making any real deposits to keep the account active.
Exactly. And the numbers from the American Perspective Survey show the balance is terrifyingly low. Get this right now. 49% of Americans have 3 or fewer close friends.
Which is pretty low.
It is, but the statistic that truly stopped me in my tracks was the extreme end of the spectrum. A shocking 12% of Americans have absolutely 0 close friends.
None. 0.
None at all. To put that in perspective, in 1990, that number was just 3%.
Wow.
Yeah. In just a few decades, the population of people walking around with 0 emotional safety net has completely quadrupled.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics American Time Use Survey, we can actually track the exact timeline of how that social bank account was drained.
Really? When did it happen?
Well, the mechanism is a staggering collapse of face-to-face interaction. Back in 2003, Americans were spending about 60 minutes a day in person with friends.
Okay, an hour a day.
Right. But by 2020, that plummeted to just 20 minutes a day.
Wait, 20? But, I mean, the immediate assumption is to blame the pandemic for that 2020 number, right?
Sure, absolutely. But the critical piece of data is that by 2024, it had only marginally recovered to about 30 minutes a day.
Oh, wow. So it didn't bounce back.
No. We essentially lost half of our daily friend time permanently. And the time use logs show that the lost hour didn't go toward community service or family.
Where did it go?
It shifted almost entirely to solo leisure activities inside the home.
30 minutes a day. That is barely enough time to drink a cup of coffee.
Barely.
It certainly isn't enough time to dive into the messy, complicated, important realities of someone's life.
No, not at all.
We are replacing shared experiences with isolated consumption. But reading through the research, there is a very specific terminology being used. Being physically alone isn't necessarily the exact same thing as being lonely, is it?
No, and that's super important. The sources make a vital distinction between social isolation and loneliness. And understanding the difference is key to understanding the recession.
Okay, break that down for us.
So social isolation is an objective, quantifiable state. It is the literal lack of social contact or a small network size.
Like you are physically in a room by yourself.
Precisely. Loneliness, on the other hand, is entirely subjective. It is the distressing psychological gap between the social connections you want and the social connections you actually have.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, you could be profoundly lonely sitting in a crowded restaurant with a group of acquaintances. Or, you can be completely content and fulfilled living alone in a remote cabin.
Right, it's about how you feel about your connection.
Exactly. The crisis we're facing is that both the objective and subjective measures are surging simultaneously. A 2024 Gallup poll revealed that 20% of U.S. adults felt lonely, quote, a lot of the day yesterday.
A lot of the day yesterday. If this is resonating, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive. Because looking at that 20% figure, we have to ask the glaring question.
Yeah.
If we lost 30 to 40 minutes of face-to-face friend time every single day since the early 2000s, where did that time go? It didn't just evaporate. We have an incredibly obvious suspect sitting right in our pockets.
We do. And what's fascinating here is the stark contrast in the time use ledgers. Americans are currently spending roughly 159 minutes on digital platforms every single day.
Over 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Compare that 159 minutes of scrolling to the mere 30 minutes spent face-to-face with friends.
Wow, that's a massive shift.
It is. We've traded embodied physical presence for digital consumption. And an Ohio State University study highlighted in our sources measured the impact of that trade.
What did they find?
They found that adults who fall into the top 25% of social media use are more than twice as likely to report experiencing high levels of loneliness.
Twice as likely.
Yeah, and even when the researchers controlled for demographics, income, and living situations, that correlation held incredibly strong.
I am looking at those Ohio State numbers, but I find myself wondering about the generational nuance here.
How so?
Well, we constantly frame social media as this ultimate villain. But for Gen Z and younger millennials, digital connection isn't a replacement for real life, it is real life.
That's a very fair point.
Right. They are building massive Minecraft worlds together, they share memes that act as inside jokes, they FaceTime while doing homework. How can the data say they are isolated when they are interacting constantly?
It's a great question. And the data doesn't dismiss those digital connections, it actually captures the complexity of them.
Okay.
A recent Pew Research survey looked specifically at teens and their digital habits, and the findings reveal a massive double-edged sword.
So it's not all bad.
No. On one hand, 74% of teens say social media does help them feel more connected to their friends. It is a vital lifeline for maintaining what sociologists call weak ties, keeping them plugged into the broader social fabric.
So the platforms are successfully delivering on their basic premise of connectivity.
They deliver connectivity, but they often fail to deliver intimacy.
Ah.
Yeah. That same Pew study found that 39% of those teens feel overwhelmed by the drama on these platforms, and about a third report feeling actively excluded or pressured by the curated lives they see.
That makes a lot of sense.
Digital contact acts as a low-calorie substitute for embodied time. A text message or a like doesn't trigger the same biochemical responses, the release of oxytocin or the mirroring of facial expressions that happen when you sit across from a human being.
Right, your brain knows the difference.
Exactly. And this creates what the researchers call the loneliness paradox. We are the most technologically hyper-connected humans in the history of our species, capable of instantly messaging someone on the other side of the planet, yet we are experiencing unprecedented levels of subjective, painful isolation.
The loneliness paradox. You have 1,000 friends in your pocket, but when your car breaks down on the highway, there is no one you feel comfortable calling for a ride.
Exactly.
But, blaming the smartphone almost feels like a cop-out. It lets the rest of our societal structure completely off the hook. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because the sources dive into how the physical layout of our neighborhoods and our modern cultural values have systematically engineered spontaneity completely out of our daily routines.
This is such a huge piece of the puzzle. The built environment and our shifting cultural scripts are massive, invisible forces driving this recession.
We don't even see them happening.
Right. We often treat friendship as a matter of personal effort, completely ignoring the structural hurdles placed right in front of us.
Let's look at the cultural script first, because reading this felt like holding up a mirror. Modern friendship has mutated into something resembling corporate calendar management.
Oh, totally.
It feels like you need an executive assistant just to see your friends. You don't just drop by a neighbor's house anymore to see if they want to sit on the porch.
No, that's almost considered rude now.
Or an invasion of privacy. Instead, you text them to see when they are free, you cross-reference your respective Google calendars, and you try to book a 45-minute window for coffee 3 weeks from Tuesday.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Sociologists refer to this cultural shift as busyness as identity.
Busyness as identity.
Yeah. In the modern era, particularly in the US, constant work and scheduled optimization have become our dominant social status symbols.
Wow.
If you have free, unstructured time, the cultural implication is that you aren't important or successful enough.
That is so true. And that administrative burden you mentioned becomes exponentially heavier when we factor in the phenomenon of intensive parenting.
Yes. The section on intensive parenting was incredibly revealing.
It really was eye-opening. It describes this relatively recent cultural demand where a child's achievements, their travel soccer teams, the endless tutoring, the highly structured weekend tournaments become the parent's primary social identity.
Right.
Parents are pouring all their residual energy into managing their children's lives, which completely crowds out the time, energy, and financial resources required to maintain adult friendships.
It leaves nothing left in the tank.
Exactly. The parents' social lives become entirely secondary, tethered only to the sidelines of their kids' activities.
And when those parents, or a single person, or an empty nester does finally carve out a free moment, the next hurdle is figuring out where to actually go.
Right.
This brings in the physical architecture. The sources detail the tragic, decades-long decline of third places.
Third place.
Yeah. If the first place is your home and the second place is your workplace, the third place is the informal communal living room of a society.
Okay, I like that.
It's the local cafe, the public library, the community park, the neighborhood pub, or the recreation center.
It is a physical space where you can just exist, where the barrier to entry is low and you aren't constantly pressured to spend money just to occupy a chair.
Exactly. And those spaces are vanishing.
Yeah.
They're either closing due to financial pressure, or they're becoming aggressively transactional. Combine the loss of those communal spaces with modern suburban sprawl and car-centric urban design.
Right, everyone is in a car.
We are literally physically separated by massive multi-lane highways and sprawling distances. The serendipity of bumping into your neighbor while walking to the market has been engineered out of existence.
Because you are both strapped into vehicles driving to a big box store 3 towns over.
Exactly. Furthermore, the data clearly shows this closure of third places disproportionately impacts rural communities and lower-income, socially vulnerable neighborhoods.
So it's an equity issue, too.
Massively.
Yeah.
So the friendship recession isn't just an emotional issue. It is a profound issue of socioeconomic inequality.
If you don't have disposable income and the free public spaces in your town are bulldozed for a parking lot, your ability to casually socialize just evaporates.
It really does.
Which leads me to wonder who is bearing the heaviest brunt of this architectural and cultural shift. I was looking at the demographic breakdown in the sources, and the numbers for men genuinely shocked me.
Yeah, they're stark.
What is happening there, and how does age factor into this?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the gender divide reveals the fragile ways we are socialized to seek support. Interestingly, Pew Research data shows that men and women actually report very similar overall levels of subjective loneliness.
Oh, really?
Yeah, around 16% of both groups say they often feel lonely. However, the underlying architecture of their social safety nets looks completely different.
The feeling is the same, but the reality of who they can call in a crisis is different.
Radically different. Women, structurally speaking, tend to build much wider, more diverse support webs. When a woman faces a life crisis, she is statistically more likely to turn to multiple nodes in that web. Her close friends, her mother, a suitor, other relatives, or mental health professionals.
They have options.
Exactly. Men, conversely, are traditionally socialized to rely almost exclusively on a single pillar for deep emotional support, their spouse or romantic partner.
Wow.
They communicate with their male peers less often about vulnerable personal matters, focusing more on shared activities instead.
It is exactly like putting all your emotional retirement savings into one single, highly volatile stock.
That is the perfect analogy.
If that stock crash, like if you go through a breakup or a divorce, you are left entirely bankrupt.
It explains the massive vulnerability we see in the data. If a man is single or his primary relationship ends, his entire emotional infrastructure can vanish overnight.
That's terrifying.
Hence, we arrive at that staggering statistic where 15% of men report having absolutely zero close friends. They simply don't have the diversified portfolio of relationships to fall back on.
And what about the generational aspect? Because, the cultural trope is always the lonely senior citizen sitting by the window watching the world go by.
Right.
But the data paints a vastly different, almost inverted picture.
The American Neighbor Survey data shatters that stereotype completely. Adults under the age of 50 are more than twice as likely to say they are lonely compared to adults over 50.
Twice as likely.
Yeah. The group that is actually the most likely to say they hardly ever feel lonely are older adults, those 65 and up.
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that.
But the steepest, most alarming drop in connection is happening among young adults, specifically right outside their front doors.
With their neighbors.
Yes. In 2012, 51% of young adults reported talking to their neighbors regularly. Today, that number has plummeted to just 25%.
3/4 of young adults barely speak to the people living 50 feet away from them. You share a physical wall with someone in an apartment building, you hear their television, but you don't even know their first name. We are living in these incredibly dense clusters of humanity, yet we are completely atomized.
Well, atomized.
So, what does this all mean? We've looked at the changing architecture, the time use charts, the demographic vulnerabilities. But moving beyond the sociology, I really want to understand the physical reality. Why does a lack of neighborly chats or coffee dates actually matter on a biological level?
It matters because the human body does not perceive social isolation as an inconvenience. No, it perceives it as a mortal threat.
A mortal threat.
Yes. To understand this, we have to look at evolutionary biology. For early humans, being separated from the tribe meant almost certain death from predators or starvation.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, our brains evolved to treat social isolation as a physical emergency. When you lack a tribe today, your nervous system interprets that as danger, and it stays in a constant state of hypervigilance, pumping out stress hormones like cortisol to keep you alert.
Wait, so an empty calendar is literally triggering an ancient predator survival response. The body is bracing for an attack that isn't coming.
Precisely. And that chronic low-grade flood of cortisol causes massive systemic inflammation, literally wearing down your organs over time.
Oh my goodness.
This is why the health warnings in these sources are so stark. The World Health Organization estimates that loneliness contributes to 871,000 deaths a year globally.
That is a staggering number.
Furthermore, the U.S. Surgeon General has stated unequivocally that prolonged social disconnection carries a mortality risk comparable to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
15 cigarettes a day. That is just wow.
Yeah. On a purely physiological level, loneliness drastically increases your risk for stroke, it drives up the risk for heart disease, and it significantly accelerates cognitive decline and dementia.
We launch massive public health campaigns to get people to stop smoking, but we treat having no friends as a quirky personal trait.
We do, and it's dangerous.
This data reframes connection entirely. It isn't just a nice-to-have luxury, it is a biological imperative. It is literal medicine.
Absolutely.
So if the house is burned down, how do we begin to lay new bricks? The sources offer a surprisingly actionable framework for rebuilding, focusing heavily on a concept called the strength of weak ties.
Yes, the strength of weak ties is a foundational theory by sociologist Mark Granovetter.
Tell us about that.
Well, the problem with trying to cure loneliness is that we assume we need to immediately find a lifelong soulmate or a best friend who understands our deepest, darkest secrets.
Right, which feels impossible.
That expectation is totally paralyzing. But Granovetter's research demonstrates that weak ties, the barista you see every Tuesday morning, the coworker you chat with by the elevator, the neighbor whose dog you wave at, those actually provide massive psychological benefit.
Really, just casual chats.
Yeah. These low-stakes interactions foster a baseline level of trust, they circulate local information, and they make our nervous systems feel safely anchored to a wider community.
It takes the pressure off. You don't need a blood brother, you just need to be a familiar face.
Exactly.
The action plan outlined in the sources is brilliantly simple because it focuses on small, intentional disruptions to our isolation. Things like sending a brief text message to an old friend just to say, I saw this and thought of you, with zero expectation of a massive hour-long catch-up conversation.
Keep it simple.
Or making it a deliberate point to learn your immediate neighbor's first name so you aren't just living next to a stranger.
And moving from the micro to the macro, it means actively advocating for a less isolating environment too.
How so?
It means supporting local zoning reforms that allow for walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods. It means showing up to vote, to fund the local library, the parks, and the community centers so those vital third places don't disappear into private development.
We have to protect those spaces.
We really do. It requires treating community engagement as an essential pillar of your physical health, prioritizing it with the same non-negotiable weight you would give a doctor's appointment.
Like, comment, and subscribe to hear more My Mind MashUps deep dives. Because understanding these invisible forces is the first step to genuinely changing how we operate day to day.
Absolutely.
Let's bring all of this together. We started with that sinking feeling on the couch, the emotional sting of having a phone full of contacts but a physical life devoid of presence.
Yeah.
We tracked the time use data, watching face-to-face interaction collapse from 60 minutes down to 30, while our digital screen time skyrocketed to over 2.5 hours, feeding us a paradox of connected isolation.
Then we unraveled the structural barriers that engineer out spontaneity. The suburban sprawl, the systematic closure of accessible community spaces, and a modern cultural obsession with busyness and intensive parenting that leaves literally no oxygen for adult friendships.
We explored the demographic fallout, seeing how different socialization leaves men with dangerously thin safety nets and young adults incredibly isolated from their own geographic neighbors.
You're all connected.
It really is. And finally, we confronted the stark biological reality that an isolated nervous system is as deadly as a 15-cigarette-a-day habit. But the medicine can be as simple as learning the name of the person who serves your coffee.
The decline of friendship is a massive systemic problem, but the immediate power to begin reversing it is profoundly individual and local.
I think we have covered the full spectrum of the data today. To wrap us up, I'd love for you to leave us with a final thought on how we can mentally approach this moving forward.
Well, based on the cultural analysis in our sources today, I want to pose a new idea.
Okay.
We talked at length about how our culture's hustle and busyness has made economic productivity our dominant social identity.
We did.
But what if we completely flipped the script on how we view success?
Oh, I like where this is going.
What if, instead of just putting our education and our work history on a resume, we culturally valued social wealth?
Social wealth.
Yeah. Imagine if society judged our success not by the hours we billed last week or the title on our office door, but by the vibrancy of our local community ties and our dedication to our friends.
That would change everything.
It really would. How would your life change if being a highly reliable friend was actually considered your most impressive credential?
What a beautiful paradigm shift. Find My Mind MashUps everywhere you listen. Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, Pocket Casts, Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube.
We truly love digging into these complexities and finding the human element in the data with you.
Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could shape our next deep dive.